Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So for today's case I'm going to be talking to you about is the Nicholas Todd Sutton case. So Nicholas Todd Sutton was born on July the 15th, 1961 and had sadly passed away on February the 20th, 2020. He was an American serial killer who was responsible for murdering two acquaintances and his own grandmother in North Carolina and Tennessee from August to December 1979, convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment for these crimes. Sutton, among three others, later participated in a 1985 prison killing over drugs. For the final crime, he was sentenced to death and executed in 2020 by the electric chair. Sutton is the most recent person to be executed in this manner. Nicholas Todd Sutton was born on July the 15th, 1961 in Morristown in Tennessee. His mother abandoned him at birth, and while his father was a mentally ill and verbally abusive alcoholic. He was constantly detained in either mental institutions or various jails. As he grew up, Sutton was taught to use drugs that was by his father, leading to the drug addiction that would then last up to his incarceration. When he was still a teenager, Sutton's father died suddenly, leading him to be adopted by his widowed grandmother, who was called Dorothy Virginia Sutton, a school teacher that was living in Lowland. Nicky, as he had been nicknamed, eventually would drop out of school due to a frequent fighting with different classmates, leaving his grandmother to pay for his living expenses. Despite her having good intentions, he often then squandered the money on weekly purchases of cocaine and also maintaining his pit bulls, and even resold a pickup truck and land plot in North Carolina, which his grandmother had given to him as a gift. On the day of Christmas 1979, Sutton went to the Morristown Police Department to report his grandma missing. In his statements, he claimed that he had last seen her 3 days prior in the company of an unknown male. An examination of a family house, however, reveals it said that there were signs of foul play, most notably blood spots on the carpet, walls and floors. Shortly after, Sutton was detained for questioning while investigators then was examining tips in order to locate Mrs. Sutton's body, one of which led them to a property that was in North Carolina. Upon their return, Sutton said that he had stuffed his grandmother's body in a bag, weighed it down with a cinder block, and then thrown it into the Nolichucky River, with the forensic autopsy determining that she had been hit in the back of her head with a blunt instrument, but later drowned after being thrown into the river. Sutton was charged with the murder and his bail was set at $100,000. When pressed for a motive, Sutton claimed that while he was disposing of the body, he was not a killer, and then what he had done was a result of a panic that was after finding Dorothy lying on the floor upon returning home. Thinking that she was dead, he decided to get rid of the body to not be accused of being a murderer. His claims was not taken seriously, and Sutton was subsequently convicted and then sentenced to life imprisonment of the murder. Following his conviction, Sutton changed his story, then claiming that the actual killer was a 46-year-old Charles Pomeroy Allman III, a Knoxville contractor who was pressing him for some money. Allegedly, Allman broke into the Sutton household and then attacked them, killing his grandmother in the process, but Sutton then somehow managed to take his gun and shoot him, before then dumping both of their bodies into the river. When police and the prosecutors alike were very skeptical of his version of events. They were convinced then that Alman could then indeed have been killed, and then he had been reported missing for over 2 months by that point. And it was abandoned then. Gold Jaguar found in front of the Holiday Inn in Newport. During the investigations, Sutton then confessed to yet another murder, that of his 19-year-old childhood friend, John Michael Large, with whom he shared an apartment with in Knoxville. He claimed that sometime from August the 10th to 22nd, he and his set up a meeting with the Large at his house, with his aunt's remote farm in Waterville in North Carolina, where he kept a stash of marijuana and some white liquor. At that time, the two friends had been involved in a bitter argument over money, as Lodge then supposedly had to use $25,000 to purchase cocaine from Ohio, but never got around to doing so. Driving to the farm then, the barn, on his motorcycle, Large suddenly opened fire on him, before the pair ended up getting into a fight. In the ensuing scuffle, he then said he hit him with a tobacco stick, and this was before grabbing the dog chain that was nearby, with which he then beat and choked Large. While he was still recovering from the beating, Sutton then grabbed the tobacco stick and then rammed it down Large's throat, killing him instantly. He then dragged the body to a slope that was near Mount Sterling, and then he buried it in a shallow grave among some sumac groves. With Sutton's direction, the police then quickly located Large's burial site, exhumed the body and sent it to the Chapel Hill for an autopsy. The coroner determined that the cause of death was definitely blunt force trauma. This was to the head, and an object that was found in Large's mouth was a piece of plywood, not a piece of tobacco stick. Nevertheless, a murder warrant was issued for the state of North Carolina for Sutton. As the killing then occurred in the jurisdiction, when it came to the Alman case, the authorities was unable to find his body in the river, leading them to believe that Sutton had buried him somewhere else. With these doubts arising, Sutton changed his story yet again, claiming that Alman and an unidentified accomplice had robbed a bank in the Asheville area, and then they gave him $1,500, and this is in exchange for acting as their getaway driver. On April 29, 1980, Sutton was arraigned for Large's murder in North Carolina, and while the authorities was back in Tennessee, continued to search for Alman's body. On May the 14th, scuba divers investigated an old rock quarry that was near to Newport that was uncovering the remains of at least 4 bodies, one of which was thought to belong to Alman. Like his other victims, it bore what the investigators had then termed as Sutton's signature. It was wrapped up in bags with cinder blocks and sank at the bottom of the quarry. The other bodies were determined to be unrelated to the case. Upon hearing of the discovery, Sutton spontaneously confessed to 2 additional victims, an Alacoa teenager that he had apparently killed in July 1978 and then buried in North Carolina, and a supposed drug buyer then that was from Atlanta he had also buried on the family's farm. As a result of these confessions, the search at the quarry was temporarily called off. Not long after, the police in both North Carolina and Tennessee had obtained the search warrants to locate the new alleged victims, whose identity Sutton's had never disclosed. In an effort to locate them, prosecutors offered a plea deal with the convict, sparing the death penalty in exchange for him telling them where the burial site locations were. After numerous failed searches, it was deducted that the undiscovered victims were made up by Sutton. In June 1980, he was additionally charged with Almond's murder. In a bid to avoid the possible death penalty, Sutton pleaded guilty to both murder charges. Subsequently receiving 2 more life imprisonment terms. At his sentencing, Sutton claimed that he had done the killings in a fit of anger and he was just reckless, willingly accepting his sentence. After his conviction, Sutton initially served his sentence at the Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary before being transferred to the maximum security Morgan County Correctional Complex in Wartburg. While in prison, he continued using the dealing drugs to then the fellow inmates, one of whom was a 44-year-old Carl Isaac Estep, who was serving a life term for raping a 9-year-old girl, which was in Knoxville. In early January 1985, the two got into a dispute over some drugs, with Estep threatening to kill Sutton using a homemade knife. In response, Sutton and 3 other inmates, 23-year-old Charles Arnold Freeman, 33-year-old Thomas Street, and 22-year-old David Wesley Steffel-Street, had then decided to arm themselves with knives and take revenge on Estep. On January the 15th, the quartet went to Estep's cell and stabbed him 38 times. None were charged until May the 20th, with Sutton, Freeman and Street all being charged with first-degree murder, with Steffel-Street was charged as an accessory. In March 1986, the jury found Sutton and Street guilty on the murder charge, then sentencing the former to death and the latter to life imprisonment. Freeman and Steffel-Street were each acquitted. In the decades following his death sentence conviction, Sutton and his lawyers launched a repeated appeal to various courts, arguing that his troubled personal life and good behaviour after the incident were all mitigating factors. These claims were backed up by several correctional officers at the Riverbend Maximum Security Institution who said that Sutton was a Christian convert and model inmate to those cared for the sick inmates that was on death row, and have even saved guards' lives during the prison riots. Reportedly, 5 of the jurors who had originally given the death sentence now supported his bid for the commutation, as well as several of his victims' relatives. The sentiment was not shared by the sister of John Large, Amy Large Cook, who said that he had deserved to die as she would visit the prison on a day of his execution. Likewise, his uncle Thomas Davis said in an interview that he had broken all contact with him and that Sutton was totally somebody who didn't even take part or shouldn't have taken part in society. In January 2020, Sutton notified prison officials that he had chosen the electric chair over the lethal injection as the execution method, a choice allowed by Tennessee law. In the end, Sutton's death sentence was cemented, as Governor Bill Lee rejected his clemency application a week before the schedule of the execution date. This was soon followed by a refusal from the Supreme Court to issue a stay of execution. On February 20th, 2020, Sutton was executed via the electric chair that was at the Riverbend Maximum Security Institution. In his final statement, Sutton spoke at length about his faith, love and gratefulness to his family, friends and Jesus Christ. After having his spiritual advisor serve the communion, consistent of Welch's grape juice and a wafer, Sutton ate his requested last meal of fried pork chops, mashed potatoes with gravy, peach pie with vanilla ice cream. His last words was, quote, "I'm just grateful to be a servant of God." Sutton is the most recent person to be executed by the electric chair that was in the United States as of 2023. Okay then everyone, so that is today's case. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I see you again next time. Take care.